Hello, I'm Ken. This is my testimony on forgiveness. The Lord God works in mysterious ways. To understand this testimony, I have to give some background information. I am one of three children to my parents. One of my earliest memories that I have today, over 50 years ago, involves my dad. When I was 18 months old, my dad had me in the stroller behind the car while he and my mom were taking out groceries and packages from the trunk of the car. My dad did not see me crawl into the trunk and proceeded to slam the trunk on my head. It was painful and traumatic. That is why it is so clear to me. I was taken to a nearby clinic. I recall as I was wailing, the nurse coming to me. I was in pain and did not understand why. The nurse was trying to apply stitches to me. She pulled out a package of fruit striped gum. It had a very colorful package wrapper. She placed the gum in my view but out of my reach. She asked, "Kenny, can you get the gum?" Well, I stopped crying because now I had a task to get that gum. Little did I know that she had did this to calm me down so she could apply the stitches to my head. I had 2 in the front and 4 in the back. After reaching and stretching, I was able to get the gum. I was so happy. She smiled, took the gum and put it out a little further, and then she asked if I could do that again. I thought this was a game. She finished stitching my head up. I grabbed the gum again. She said I could keep it. Moving forward in time, I am now 5 years old. We lived in a house in Chicago suburbia with an above-ground pool in the backyard. My younger brother and I shared a bedroom while my older sister had her own bedroom. Still, at 5, I thought I was king of the world. And then my kingdom came crashing down. I didn't know what I did wrong. Daddy was gone and Mommy was crying. What did I do to cause this problem? I remember my mother, my siblings, and I would visit my grandmother. We stayed at Nana's place for a couple of nights, and then I asked Mom, "When are we going home? I want to go back to my bedroom." Then I was told we were never going back to there again. About a year later, my dad showed up. I was happy to see him, but I asked, where had he been all this time? I was told, "Don't worry about it, run along and play." It wasn't until much later in life that I found out my dad had gotten drunk and shot someone with a revolver he'd carried. The man he shot did not die, but my dad had to go to prison. Since my dad was the only source of income at the time, my mother sold the house and we moved in with my grandmother. Later on in life, I was about 14 years old. I remember sitting at the dining room table with my dad and my brother. I don't know what brought about my dad to ask this question, but he asked, "Is there anything I did to you boys while growing up that I needed to say I'm sorry for?" I thought, here's my chance to hear the words that I longed to hear. So I said, "Well, yeah, you slammed the trunk on my head when I was 18 months old." He said, "You turned out all right." I was crushed emotionally by his reply. Throughout my life, I did honor my dad and tried to maintain a relationship with him, but I still had some resentment and anger towards him. Even after hearing the Lord's voice and feeling his hand go through me in 2007, this anger and resentment to my dad would pop up every now and then. My dad passed away due to emphysema in 2010. I kept with my spiritual journey and talked very openly to the Lord about anything I was going through, good, bad, and the ugly. I had encountered the Lord through a 12-step meeting. My spiritual awakening testimony is on YouTube. Well, in late 2012, while at the place I attended my 12-step meeting, I was reading a letter someone had placed on the corkboard for announcements. It was from a young man, 25 years old, that was in prison in Southern Illinois and wanted to be paroled into this area so he can attend 12-step recovery meetings in this area. As I was reading this letter, I heard clearly a voice say, "Write him." I looked around. I'm the only one here in the room. Go back to reading the letter, and then I heard the voice louder, "Write him." I said, "Okay, I can write this man in prison." So I wrote him. We exchanged several letters. His name was Donnie. He was 25 years old. He was in prison for 3 years for a 5-year sentence, and his parole was coming up in about a year or less. During his incarceration, he told me that he had never had a visitor and asked if I would visit him in prison. I thought, if I'm going to have this man paroled to my place to live here, then I better go and meet him. So I picked a date and let Donnie know I was coming. It was about a 5-hour drive one way to get to the prison. I arrived about 3 p.m. Visitation was only until about 5 p.m. After going through prison security, I was told to sit at a particular table and wait. By the way, from the prison website, I was able to see a picture of Donnie, so I knew what he looked like. It seemed like forever, but probably was only 5 minutes. Then Donnie appeared. He was tall, 6'2", big, muscular arms with 1,000 tattoos. He came up to me and hugged me. I knew him from the letters, but this was the first time meeting him. We sat at the assigned table. He sat across from me and placed his hands out, so I noticed, these particular tattoos on his forearm. They were pictures of kids. There were 3 kids. I asked him, "What are these tattoos?" And he told me that soon before he was to go to prison, his girlfriend had given birth to triplets. These were tattoos of his children. The time flew by, and I was back out, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the prison. Then the Spirit overcame me. This meeting was completely for me. My dad was in prison with 3 children he left behind to do his time. I can have empathy and compassion for this man in prison that I do not really know, yet I still hold anger and resentment towards my dad. The Spirit wore me down, and I started bawling and crying. I gave up my anger and resentment toward my dad. I truly forgave him, finally. Then I asked for forgiveness. I did visit Donnie in prison one more time, still thinking he might be paroled to my place. However, due to restrictions on his parole, he was not allowed to be paroled here. This was my first confirmation, or this was a further confirmation for me that the Lord God had me go through this entire experience to cleanse my heart. May the Lord God bless you.